before anybody go down in the comment section and just panicking and typing, where in the world is the review for the midweek games? The answer to that is that I haven't done it yet, but I will do it later tonight after the LAFC versus FC Dallas game. And the reason why I'm doing the preview first is since there's still a couple of hours before the Dallas versus LAFC game, I might as well just do the preview first, and then I, of course, will do the review later tonight. Now, one of the problems of doing that is that some of the games that I'm going to be mentioning in the preview is basically the game that I'm going to be talking about in the review. And since this week I'm doing in the last 5 games and talk about the last 5 games for each of these teams, I included the one where some of these teams play in the midweek, and that I included those games in the last 5 games. So some of the things I'll say will be a little bit repetitive heading into tonight's review, but it's alright. I hope you guys don't mind at all with that. But that being said, let's actually begin with the first game. And oh, by the way, there is going to be a full slate of MLS action, which means that there's going to be 12 games again. But there's not going to be Friday game this week. There's only going to be Saturday and Sunday game. I don't exactly know the exact number of how many Saturday and Sunday game we're going to get this week, but I'll check once I, of course, switch the boards and talk about the last 6 games of this MLS match week number 2 action. But we start off with the early bird game between Montreal versus New England, and the reason why I call it early bird is because it's 10 a.m. for me. And here's a little secret that I want to tell you guys. I actually have not watched any of the 10 a.m. games, and I have not got up 10 a.m. to watch any of these early action because, for me, 10 a.m. is very early. It might not be early for some of you, but for me, I usually wake up like around noon or 1 o'clock on Saturday. I usually go to bed very late on a Friday night. So yeah, that's why I never usually wake up that early to watch these games, and I just kind of watch the condensed version of it. But that being said, talk about this game between Montreal versus New England. Montreal, of course, coming into this game with a 6-2-5 record, while New England have a 3-2-8 record. The big story of this game is Bruce Arena is going to be making his Revolution head coach debut in this one. And, the last time, of course, Bruce Arena was coaching an MLS team, it was with the Galaxy, and I believe it was in 2015. So let's see how is he going to do now that MLS has changed a lot. Like, MLS in 2015 is just so much different than what it is now in 2019. And it feels like back in 2015, it was kind of still in an MLS 1.0 and kind of a heading right around the 2.0 era. Now it's at an MLS 3.0 kind of era. It's going to be interesting to see how Bruce Arena will adapt in terms of the new way that MLS is right now. In the last 5 games for both of these teams, Montreal, they lost 2-1 in the last game against FC Cincinnati. They won 2-1 against the Red Bulls, lost 2-0 to the other New York team, NYCFC. Then they won 1-0 against Chicago, and in the last meeting between both of these teams, Montreal was able to win 3-0 against New England. While for New England, they won 3-1 against the Quakes, but before that, it was a dumpster fire that this team was suffering. They lost 5-0 to Chicago, lost 6-1 to the Union, drew 4-4 against Sporting KC, and as I mentioned, they lost 3-0 to Montreal. So yeah, certainly, Montreal, they already have the upper hand in terms of this series, but things are definitely going to be different this time because not only Montreal is going to be playing at home this time, but Bruce Arena is going to be taking charge of this, and this is definitely a new era kind of New England Revolution team, and that their name kind of fits what they have done this week. It feels like they just gone through a revolution this week by getting rid of the old guard and bringing in the new, although I don't think Bruce Arena counts as a new guard because he's been in MLS for so long now, but still, they kind of clean house a lot with getting rid of the head coach and getting rid of the GM this week, and we shall see if it will work out for this team. I mean, I'm not going to judge after 1 week. Like, if New England does not win this, I'm not going to judge and say that this new regime sucks. It's going to take time to see whether or not if this New England team will improve and whether or not if Bruce Arena can turn around this team. But moving on into the next match, is RSL taking on TFC. RSL have a record of 4-1-6, while TFC have a record of 5-2-4, but they are sinking fast in the Eastern Conference. RSL, of course, won 3-2 against Colorado away, while TFC drew 0-0 against DC United at home. In the last 5 games, RSL won 3-2 against Colorado in the Rocky Mountain Derby. They lost 2-1 against Portland, then lost by the same score against the Galaxy, won 3-0 on the road against FC Cincinnati, and won 2-1 against Orlando City at home. While for TFC, they drew 0-0 against DC United in that midweek game where they had 35 shots in that game, which was just insane. And they also broke the record for the most shot in a game without scoring a goal, and also shot the third most shot of any team in a single game in MLS history. Well, for TFC, the other 4 games, they lost 2-1 against the Union, lost 2-0 against Atlanta. They did win 2-0 against Orlando City, but they also lost 2-1 to the Portland Timbers. So they've only won 1 out of their last 5 games, and as I mentioned, they are sinking real fast right now. They were near the top of the Eastern Conference a couple of weeks ago. Now they find themselves in 6th place, and they are threatening to drop out of that playoff position. So for RSL, this is definitely a good chance for them to get a win against a struggling TFC team. This TFC team right now, besides the fact that the defense is still a big issue, it's now the attack that is a huge issue with this team. Because right now, without Altidore in this team, which I also have just heard that Altidore has unfortunately re-injured himself doing a training session, and that he could be once again out for a couple of weeks, and that must really suck for TFC, because without Josie Altidore, you can clearly see how they just have nobody that can be clinical. I mean, they can create chances, they definitely have creativity going forward, but nobody can basically put away those chances, and it's all about that clinical final finish. That is where TFC is clearly lacking right now, and it's no wonder why they are sinking down in the Eastern Conference because of that. But like I said, with RSL, they got to take advantage of this. It's a home game for them, and as I mentioned with RSL before, they need to win their home game. This is a team that struggles on the road, and that if you do not win your home game, RSL, then yeah, there's most likely you are not going to make the playoffs this season. But moving on into the next one is the Quakes. So they have a record of 3-2-6. They are going to be playing against a Chicago Fire team that their win, draws, and loss column is all at 4. The Quakes, of course, lost 3-1 against New England away. That ended their 4-game unbeaten run, while Chicago, of course, won 2-0 against Minnesota at home. And in the last 5 games, the Quakes, as I mentioned, lost to the Refs 3-1. They won 1-0 against FC Cincinnati, drew 0-0 to FC Dallas, drew 2-2 to Seattle, and won 4-1 against Sporting KC. As for Chicago, they won 2-0 against Minnesota, won 5-0 against the Revs, drew 0-0 to LAFC, lost 1-0 to Montreal, and lost 1-0 to NYCFC. So, yeah, the Quakes, they are going to be playing against a Chicago team that have definitely seems to started to find their form. But one thing I will say about Chicago, besides the fact that they have looked inconsistent this season, is that they tends to really struggle on the road. I believe they only have won 1 game so far on the road, and they've already been on the road for 5 to 6 games. So yeah, this is a good opportunity for the Quakes, a team that so far, they have definitely been much better at home, and kind of like what they were a couple of seasons ago, where it seemed like the Quakes just never tends to lose at home, and that Avaya Stadium was just kind of a fortress until last year, where that fortress basically just completely crumbles because the team cannot win games to save their lives. This is a big chance for them to get a win, and also a good chance to kind of brush off that frustrating loss to New England. I mean, the Quakes, they were in a very good form heading to that Revs game, and I thought for sure that they were going to get something out of it. They didn't. Now they need to bounce back, and hopefully that what we saw a month ago and what we saw in the month of April is not just fool's goals for the Quakes, and that's just them peaking in form, and now they are going to go back to the same old Quakes as it was the last couple of seasons. But moving on into the next game is the Union. They play against the Seattle Sounders, and this is definitely a very marquee kind of matchup because both of these teams are very good. The Union are just on fire right now. They won 2-1 against TFC. While for the Sounders, they won 2-1 against Orlando City. I think the Union are also 6 games unbeaten coming into this one. And in the last 5 games for the Union, they won 2-1 against TFC. They won 6-1 against the Revs. Won 2-0 against FC Cincinnati. Drew 1-1 to Philly, but also won 3-0 against Montreal. As for Seattle, they won 2-1 against Orlando City in the midweek game. Won 1-0 against Houston. Drew 1-1 against Minnesota, drew 1-1 against LAFC, and drew 2-2 against the Quakes. So both of these teams are actually unbeaten in 5 games. I believe Seattle is unbeaten in 5, and the Union, as I said, they were unbeaten in 6 games. So something tells me that if one of these teams are going to win this game, something's going to have to give. And, for the Sounders, they definitely avoided that dreaded trap against Orlando City by winning 2-1, but now the fact that they have to travel all the way across the other side of the country on a short week to play against a Union team that's just been unstoppable lately, and especially at home where they have been just so good at home. They only lost 1 game so far this season at home, and that was in the first game of the season. But other than that, they have been untouchable at home. So yeah, this is definitely a very marquee matchup. This is a matchup that certainly a lot people will pay attention, and it will also be a good test for the Union, who, they are definitely a team that is on fire right now, but at the same time, they are going to be playing against a Sounders team that is also very good. And when you see some of the wins that they had lately, some of those wins have been against team that isn't really like some of these teams are in playoff position. TFC, Montreal are teams that is kind of like in playoff position, but Vancouver and FC Cincinnati is not, and New England is not in playoff position. So they've been having a bit of an easy kind of stretch, but now let's see if they can prove that despite the fact that they have been having a pretty easy stretch and been able to get at least a point out of this match, can they, of course, face against a Seattle team that is one of the best teams in the league and still able to get result against them. But moving on into the next game is Minnesota. They play against the Columbus Crew. So Minnesota, their record is 4-3-4, while Columbus, their record is 5-1-7. And I call this game the struggling derby because both of these teams are struggling coming into this match. Minnesota, 1 win in 6 games, while Columbus, 1 win in 7 games. For Columbus, they lost 3-0 to LAFC, just completely play out of the park in that game against LAFC. They did win 3-1 against the Galaxy to snap their 6-game unbeaten or 6-game winless run, and I believe 5 straight losses. But they of course lost 3-1 against DC United, lost 2-0 against Houston, and then lost 1-0 again to DC United. While for Minnesota, they lost 2-0 against Chicago, drew 1-1 against Seattle, won 1-0 against DC United, drew 0-0 against the Galaxy, and they lost 4-3 against TFC. So I think when you look at both of these teams, besides the fact that they are struggling so far, it seemed like both of these teams cannot score. Like Columbus right now, when you look at most of the games, they have only scored like 1 or no goals at all. And the only exception is the win that they have, which they were able to win 3-1 and score 3 goals in that game. While for Minnesota, in the last 4 games, goal scoring is definitely an issue because they have only scored 2 goals in the last 4 games. And, for a team that earlier in this season, it was all about a team that can score goals, but the question is, can they lock it down at the back? And at times, the answer is no. They still can't not lock it down in the back. And as soon as they basically started to be better in terms of defending, they started to lose some of that quality going forward. And I think a lot of that has to do with Darwin Quintero missing a couple of games during this stretch. But it just feels like maybe it's also because they kind of started to focus a little bit more on defense. Like, I usually see when bad defensive team, when they stop giving up goals, usually they kind of focus more on the defensive end and decided to be more kind of ultra defense in terms of the way that they play, which, it's a good way to fix your defensive error. But the problem is, if you're going to go ultra defense like that throughout the game, you're not going to have a lot of attacking threat going forward. And I'm not saying Minnesota doesn't have a lot of attacking threat. I think they still have it throughout these couple of games. I didn't really see them just go super ultra defensive and didn't offer any attacking threat. But I think the reason why they have been struggling to score goals is they cannot put the ball. They cannot finish. Like, they're finishing. I talk about TFC being probably one of the worst team in terms of finishing. Minnesota is not far behind. They had a lot of chances in some of these games where if they just can put the ball into the back of the net, and if only they had a guy like Darwin Quintero, who is a clinical finisher, to put the ball into the back of the net, they wouldn't be kind of in this little drought of them not scoring goals so far this season. So, yeah, something tells me this could be a low-scoring game again, because both teams, they don't really score a lot of goals, and both team does have a decent defense. But you never know. This is MLS. Maybe this could be like a 4-3 kind of game, and that this could just be insane kind of a matchup. But moving on into the final game before I switch the board is the struggling SKC team, or should I say the wounded SKC team, against Vancouver Whitecaps. And SKC, their record is 2-4-4, while Vancouver is 3-3-6. Sporting KC, of course, winless in 6 games, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that they basically have nobody out there that is healthy for them in terms of the starting 11 that they envision to play throughout this season. While for Vancouver, of course, they lost 1-0 in the midweek against Atlanta at home. In the last 5 games, they lost 1-0 for Sporting KC, they lost 1-0 to DC United. They lost 3-0 to Atlanta, drew 4-4 against New England, lost 4-1 against the Quakes, and drew 2-2 against the Red Bulls. While for Vancouver, they lost 1-0 to Atlanta, but they beat Portland 1-0, won 3-2 against Colorado, drew 1-1 against Philly, and lost 1-0 against Orlando City. So, Vancouver, they definitely have been playing much better, although in the last game against Atlanta, that wasn't really the case, where they were playing very well in that one. And in some way, they probably are maybe lucky the fact that it was only 1-0 in that game. But they do have a chance to play against a Sporting KC team that is just absolutely wounded right now. And, right now, when I look at the Sporting KC team, when you look at this team, it doesn't seem like they have a lot of guys that is injured on the team, because, on one hand, you still have guys like Johnny Russo and I believe Felipe Gutierrez and also Christian Nemeth, and all those guys are still in that starting 11. And it's no doubt that the attack for Sporting KC hasn't really been suffer as catastrophic as their injury crises are right now, but it's all about the back line and also the midfield with this team. I mean, their back line and midfield is just completely obliterated, especially the back line too. I mean, they have so many players that is missing in the back line, and that it's no wonder why they've been conceding a lot of goals lately, and that this just does not look like a Peter Vermees kind of SKC, and a very unlike SKC way of conceding so many goals in the past couple of games. And the only thing I have to say about Sporting KC, as I mentioned before, is that they just need to ride this storm, and hopefully they can do a second half resurgence like what DC and Seattle did last season once they get everybody back healthy. And as for Vancouver, big chance for them to get something out of this game against a wounded Dynamo and continue to climb up in terms of the Western Conference. But that being said, I am now going to be switching the boards and talking about the other 6 games that's going to be happening this match week. So you know how I said that there was supposed to be 12 games this week and that I'm going to look at the last 6 games? It turns out we're actually going to be looking at the last 5 games because there was only going to be 11 games this match week, and there's going to be 7 that's going to be on Saturday and 4 that is going to be on Thursday. So except for this one, all the rest of the game is going to be on Sunday. And I think this is the first week since the international break that we actually had less than 12 games, because I assume with most of the MLS Matchweek, they usually have 12 games throughout the weekend action, and that it's very rare that you're going to get a match week where there's less than 12 games. But this week, of course, is the exception, including one that is going to be a repeat of one of the midweek games that is going to happen this week. But first, we start off with Houston versus DC on this board. Houston, they have a record of 6-2-2, while DC has a record of 7-3-3. Houston, of course, drew 1-1 to Portland at home in their midweek games, and DC drew 0-0 against TFC away, despite the fact that they gave up 35 shots, that somehow, in some way, they still drew 0-0 in that midweek game also. And in terms of the last 5 games, Houston, they drew 1-1 against Portland. They lost 1-0 to Seattle, won 3-1 or 2-1 against FC Dallas, won 2-0 against Columbus, and they lost 2-1 against the Galaxy. So after Houston were kind of off to a flying start, they have definitely started to come back down to earth and kind of struggle a little bit. For DC, they drew 0-0 against TFC, won 1-0 against SKC, won 3-1 against Columbus, lost 1-0 against DC United, and they won 1-0 against Columbus. And this actually should be switched because DC was on the road in this game. But yeah, this is definitely going to be an interesting kind of matchup. Obviously, I don't know if DC is going to do what they did against TFC, where they just pretty much parked the bus, and hopefully Bill Hamid can just bail them out and that they can just get a point. Like, seriously, I hope they do not hang Bill Hamid out dried in this game like they did against TFC, because yeah, it's one thing that you can give up 35 shots against a team that is struggling in terms of putting the ball into the back of the net, but it's another when you're facing against a team that could actually finish. And Houston is one of those teams that can actually put the ball into the back of the net and does have an attacker up front that can score goals, with the likes of Elise, Kyoto, and Minotes up front. So yeah, DC, they definitely cannot afford to do what they did against TFC in this game against Houston. But having said that, for Houston, they would definitely want all 3 points in this game. You know, it was a very disappointing result against Portland in the last game where they had the lead and then they gave up. Sounds very similar to 2018 Houston Dynamo, isn't it? Right? But yeah, they need to win this game against DC, although let's see if DC can perform a little bit better in this game, and let's see if some of their best player like Acosta and Rootney can actually make a big impact in this game. But moving on into the next match is going to be Orlando. They play against FC Cincinnati, so 2 teams that is kind of struggling right now. Orlando, they have a record of 3-3-6, while FC Cincinnati has a record of 3-2-7. Although I will say this for FC Cincinnati, they did just snap their 5-game losing streak and also snap their 5 games without scoring a goal streak in the last game by finally scoring 1 earlier in the game and also winning 2-1 against Montreal. Where Orlando City, they are now winless in 4 games, and I hate to say this or I almost said NYCFC fan, but I hate to say this to Orlando City fan, but yeah, this kind of really remind me of what has gone on in the last 2 seasons for Orlando City, where just as you thought Orlando City was maybe going to sneak into the playoffs, maybe they're going to be in the conversation, yeah, this is where the yearly kind of collapse begins for Orlando City, where they're going to lose like 20 games in a row. Well, not 20 games in a row. That's a little bit harsh to Orlando City perspective, but they're probably going to go winless in 20 games and they'll be out of the playoff picture by August. I really hope that's not the case, but right now it kind of look very similar to that. Well, FC Cincinnati, as I said, they snapped their 5-game losing streak, and in the last 5 games that for Orlando City, they lose 2-1 against Seattle, lose 1-0 to Atlanta, lose 2-0 to TFC, drew 1-1 against Orlando City, and won 1-0 against Vancouver. So, to be fair, I will say this, Orlando, they have gone through a very tough stretch, and, hopefully, when they do get a pretty easy stretch coming up, they can start winning some of these games, and this is going to be one of those that you would think that they should be able to win. I mean, FC Cincinnati, yes, they finally snapped that winless streak, but they're still a team that you would think that when you look at it, and especially when you're playing against them on the road, you should be able to get all 3 points in this game. But one thing I will also say about Orlando is they also cannot score right now. Just like FC Cincinnati, where they kind of are not that they're kind of not really scoring a lot of goals so far this season. And I'm actually not going to go talk about the last 5 games, because I know FC Cincinnati fan don't need reminder the fact that besides the win that they had, they basically put up a goose egg in the last 5 or the last 4 games that is on this board. That being said, with Orlando City, they really need to it's not going to be easy breaking down this FC Cincinnati team that tend to play a bit of a low block, although I don't think with the new head coach that is the way to play. But at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting to see how this resort is going to go. I think if this is a draw for both of these teams, it doesn't really help either of these team cases, and that when I look at this game, even if one of these teams win, I don't know if they can potentially go on a run by the rest of the season and maybe make it to the playoffs. Maybe if FC Cincinnati can get an attacker or two in the summer transfer window, maybe they have a shot in terms of going at the end of the year and maybe be in the playoffs. But other than that, both of these teams are just kind of really struggling right now. But having said that, moving on into the next one is the Red Bulls. They take on Atlanta, and this game, in the beginning of the season, everybody circled this game because this is supposed to be a game between the top 2 teams in the Eastern Conference. And although technically both of these teams are not in the top 2 in the Eastern Conference, with the way that resort has gone by for both of these teams, you kind of say that it started to kind of have that feeling of the fact that this is a very big game. The Red Bulls, of course, they won 3 out of 4 matches. And by the way, both of these teams are kind of, in terms of their season, they are kind of in a similar situation. Both of these teams are kind of off to a terrible start. And then finally, lately, they started to figure it out a little bit and started to win some games to climb up to the table. The Red Bulls, however, they're still below the red line, while Atlanta, don't look now, but they're now 3rd in the Eastern Conference, and they are rising fast. They cannot wait to take that top spot away from Philly and DC and be the king of the Eastern Conference again. And of course, they won 6 out of the last 7 matches, including 5 in a row, and including a record-breaking 5 straight clean sheets that they have got in the last 5 games. No other team in MLS history has ever got 5 straight clean sheets. So there you go. There's another record that Atlanta just broke in the league. And in terms of the last 5 games for the Red Bulls, they of course won 3-1 against FC Dallas, lost 2-1 against Montreal, won 3-2 against the Galaxy, won 1-0 against FC Cincinnati, and lost 1-0 to New England. While for Atlanta, they won 1-0 against Vancouver, 1-0 against Orlando City, 2-0 against TFC, 3-0 against SKC, and 1-0 against Colorado. Atlanta still have not conceded a goal in now almost 500 minutes. And yeah, I mean, this is definitely going to be a matchup that a lot of people will keep an eye on. Obviously, I think Atlanta is going to be heavy favorites coming into this game, despite the fact that, the Red Bulls, they started to find their grooves a little bit. I think when you look at this Atlanta team, and really, I feel like this Atlanta team this season has kind of been the opposite of what was last season. So you know how last season Atlanta, they are kind of like a free-flowing kind of attack, and they just run people off the park. This year, they're kind of not like that. Instead, they run people off the park because of the stingy defense that they have. And like I said, they have got 5 straight clean sheets in the last 5 games, which is a record in MLS. They're one of the toughest teams to break down right now. And I guess, if you're an Atlanta fan, even though you're not seeing the prettiest soccer that your team is playing, hey, if you are doing a good job in the defensive end and you're shutting teams down week in and week out and not allowing a goal, you will take that in a heartbeat. And I'll tell you what, if Atlanta can keep this up, yeah, they're definitely going to be a real contenders once again for that MLS Cup. I mean, there was never a doubt that Atlanta is going to be a contender for MLS Cup again this year, but after what we saw in the first couple of games, there was definitely a little bit of a doubt that whether or not if they can repeat and what they can do in terms of reaching to MLS Cup game or even making the playoffs again. But right now with the way Atlanta is playing, there is no doubt that they are not only going to make the playoffs, but this is a team that might be the team to beat in the Eastern Conference right now. But having said that, moving on into the next match. And no, this is not a typo. And this is the match that I talked about how it was a repeat of the midweek games. And that is between Dallas and LAFC, which, they play later tonight. I didn't include the game tonight because, they haven't played yet. But LAFC, they're coming into this game with an 8-3-1 in record, which is the best record in MLS. While FC Dallas, they are sinking fast, just like TFC. And just like TFC, they also have a 5-2-4 record. Dallas, of course, lost 3-1 to the Red Bulls at home, while LAFC won 3-0 against Columbus away, where they just completely outclassed their opponent. And they outclassed their opponent so much that even the opposition manager said that they are kind of like the Man City of MLS right now. In the last 5 games, FC Dallas, of course, they lost 3-1 against the Red Bulls, lost 2-1 against Houston, drew 0-0 against the Quakes. They won 2-1 against Atlanta, and they won 2-1 against Portland. For LAFC, they won 3-0 against Columbus, drew 0-0 against Chicago, drew 1-1 against LAFC, but won 4-1 against Seattle, or actually drew 1-1 against Seattle. I think I said LAFC. Had a little bit of brain fart moment there, but they did lose their only game of the season to the Vancouver Whitecaps. But when you look at this match, and really depend on what happened in this game, I still think that LAFC is going to be, they're definitely going to be a team to beat. Although, Dallas, this time, they're going to be playing at home. And although their home form hasn't been that good lately, you never know. Maybe if Dallas can put up a good performance, and maybe, if they can like show up and do what they have done for the first couple of weeks this season, maybe they can beat LAFC. But knowing LAFC, that is just right now just kind of an unstoppable force, most likely they're probably going to sweep FC Dallas in the span of 4 days, and that they're going to take both of those games. And to be fair, since this game hasn't happened on Thursday, you know how I just said that LAFC might sweep both of those games? Yeah, they might. That kind of prediction is kind of a bold prediction because, like I said, they haven't played tonight, and in order for LAFC to sweep both of these games, they have to win tonight's game first. But finally, moving on into the final game of this week is also another LA team involving. This time it's the Galaxy. They play against the Rapids. So this game is a game that I also call the struggling derby because Colorado, yeah, I mean, I hate to remind Rapids fan, but they are winless after 11 games. And just to add salt to the wounds, they have now lost 8 straight coming into this game. They have not won a game in almost a month and a half now. They have not even got a result or got a point in a month and a half. The last time they got a result was against SKC, and that was all the way back in March. Well, the Galaxy, after they had a 6-game winning streak, they have now lost 3 straight and are kind of on verge of doing what Orlando City did last year, which was win 6 straight, and then they just go on a tailspin. Although, I think for the Galaxy, they'll probably won't go on a tailspin, because when you look at this team, you know, with any time when you have Zlatan on your team, you're not going to ever go on a tailspin. And you know, Zlatan right now, he's been causing more issue in terms of the disciplinary issue than actually trying to cause defense a havoc right now. But still, you know, for the Galaxy, you know, if there is a time where they need to get a win and they really need to snap out of this funk that they've been in these last 3 games, then why not play against the Rapids? I mean, the Rapids are pretty much like the cure of any diseases that you have this season. You know, if you have a bad start to the season, just play the Rapids. Okay, all kidding aside, I don't want to just say the Rapids are kind of like the punching bag. And I will also say that maybe the Rapids can do something. Maybe they can finally get a point in this game, or even get a win, because, you know, this is MLS. Anything can happen in MLS. So, yeah, I'm not going to just... I feel like I just completely disrespect the Rapids, which, yeah, I do apologize that, but when you go winless in 11 games and lost 8 in a row, it's hard to not laugh at the Rapids and not kind of make fun of them and just saying that they are the punching bag. Although I shouldn't probably done that as a Quakes fan, because I know last year we were kind of in the same situation that the Rapids are in. But in terms of the last 5 games, the Galaxy, they of course lost 2-0 to NYCFC, lost 3-1 against Columbus, lost 3-2 against the Red Bulls, won 2-1 against RSL, and they drew 0-0 to Minnesota. While for Colorado, they lost 3-2 to RSL, lost 3-2 again to Vancouver, lost 1-0 to Atlanta, lost 4-1 against Colorado, and lost 3-2 against DC United. And there's been a lot of 3-2 kind of resort for Colorado, which tells you that, you know, attacking-wise, that's not the issue. The main issue right now is the defense, and it's no secret the fact that when you look at the last 5 games, 4 of those 5 games they've conceded 3 or more goals. They need to fix that defense. Like, the attack, I think they definitely have enough going forward, but that defense, if that is going to be the defense that just keep giving up 3 goals regularly, yeah, you are not going to be expecting to win a lot of games if that's going to happen. So, yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for MLS Matchweek number 12 action. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these games? Which one are you going to keep an eye on? I know a lot of people is going to say this one because, you know, everybody has been circled the Red Bulls versus Atlanta as one of the main marquee matchup. But let me know if there's any other game that interests you. And as always, make sure you guys leave your prediction in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.